So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this morning's webinar. Today, we're going to be looking at workflows and approvals in NAV. As some of you might know, my name is Adam, and I'm part of the Metaphorix account management team. I'm joined here this morning by James Sharp, who some of you may know for our consultancy team. James is going to be taking you through this morning's session, so I'll pass over in a second, and he's going to take you through what we're going to be looking at. If you've been on our webinars before, you'll know the score. If you haven't, just to let you know, at the end of this session, I'll put up my contact details on the screen. So if you do have any questions about what we showed this morning, drop me an email or give me a call and I'll be more than happy to answer them. It's a nice short one this morning, so we're looking for today's webinar to last around 15-20 minutes. So we won't be keeping you for too long. So if you're all set, James, I'll hand over to you and we'll get going.
Hi everyone. Today we're going to be going through workflows and approvals. So we'll go through the different ways you can set up approvals within a business. You might just want one approver who approves everything if it's a small company. You might want a hierarchy of approvers, and that might go in sequential order. So it might go from a team leader to a manager and then to the managing director. And all of those people will have to approve it, and they'll have to do it in that specific order. We'll also look at approval groups. So approval groups can be used if everyone in the group needs to approve it, but not necessarily in a specific order. So it needs to be approved by all of them, but in any order. And also we'll look at approval groups if just one person from that group needs to approve it. For example, it might just need to be signed off from somebody in accounts, and it doesn't matter who it is in accounts that signs it off, but it just needs to be one person. So if all the accountancy teams in that group, and anyone from that group will be able to sign it off. So we'll go through the different ways you can set up approvals and the different structures and hierarchies you can have. To demonstrate this, I'll have to switch between users to show the process of how it goes from start to finish. I'll just let you know that in advance. So approval workflows then. You can create workflows from scratch, but generally people create them from a template. There's lots of templates already within Dynamics NAV, and if you create a workflow from one of these templates, if you start from one of the templates, you can still edit it. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to create a workflow from the template and work with that, and then we're also going to change it and work with it once we've edited it for the approval groups. So the approval user setup page, we're going to be looking at that and see how you specify users and their limits. So for example, one user might be able to approve up to £100 and another user might be able to approve up to £1,000. And these limits can be different on the sales and purchasing side. So someone might be able to approve £1,000 on a sales order, but nothing on a purchase order, for example. So you have the flexibility to do different limits on the sales and purchasing side. So we'll have a look at that and how you set that up. Then we'll look at the actual approval process, so how you send an approval request and then how you approve or reject that request. And then lastly, we'll look at approval groups. So we'll look at all approving, everyone in the group to approve it in sequence order. Then we'll look at all approve, not in sequence order. And then we'll have a look at just one approval needed from the group. So firstly, I'm going to show you the approval user setup and then show one user who's only able to approve up to £1, so can't really approve anything, and then someone who has unlimited. So that first user will have to send the approval request to the second user. So if we go to approval user setup, this is where we specify our users. So I'm James, we'll pick me, and we're going to say that my purchase approval limit is £1. So I can't really, I can't post any purchase orders for more than £1. So as you can see here, this is where you would specify a sales approval limit. So you could say actually that I could approve £1,000 on a sales order, but just £1 on the purchase order. But we're not going to worry about sales approvals in this webinar. We're just going to do the purchase order ones. So we can leave this blank. We don't need to touch this for now. So we're just going to put £1 in the purchase approval limit. So if I can only approve up to £1, we then need another user who can approve more than that. So we're going to add another user. So to see this process start to finish, I'll have to swap and change between these users. So I'll send the approval request from this user, and then this second user is going to have unlimited purchase approval. So by ticking this box, whether it's £10, whether it's £1 million, this person can approve that request because they have unlimited. So that's it for now. This user will have to send the request to this user who will approve it. So that's it with regards to users and limits. So now we actually need to set up our workflow. So if we go to workflow templates, we can essentially copy one of the pre-configured Microsoft NAV templates and start from that. So if we go to purchase documents and then purchase order approval workflow and create a new workflow from the template and press OK, if we then go to our workflows, that workflow template will then appear in here. If we edit that workflow, we can enable it. I will just delete or disable this one. Okay. And then we'll be able to enable this one, because that was essentially the same workflow there. So here we've got our events, our conditions and responses, and all of these have been populated from the workflow template. So this will now work as an approval workflow, and I'll show you how that works now. So now we've got it in our workflows, and now it's enabled, and we've set up our users and our limits. We can now create a purchase order and send that purchase order for approval. Click purchase orders, and we're going to create a new one. Pick a vendor, it doesn't really matter. Put a vendor invoice number, doesn't really matter. And pick an item. And again, the item doesn't really matter as long as it's over £1, because that was what we said the limit was. So we'll put one of those so we can see that's for around £100. So that's fine. So if I try and post this, now we've got the workflow on. It says order 106046, which is this order, must be approved and released before you can perform this action. So this can't be posted because it's James who's trying to post it. If we have a look here, we can see that that's the user we've said only has the £1 limit. And because I've tried to post it and we've got a workflow on, this can't be posted. So what we need to do is we need to send an approval request. I've missed a step. In the approval user setup, we haven't specified who the approver is of my user. So we've said this user can approve up to £1, this user can approve an unlimited amount, but we haven't said that the approver for James is support. Sorry, my mistake, but that will work now. So let's create another purchase order. We probably could have used the same. Well, yeah, we could have used the same one. We'll just start again. Okay, right. Vendor invoice number, item, quantity. It's over £1. So again, try and post. Needs to be approved. Now, when we send the approval request has been sent. Okay, and it's sent that approval request to the approver, which is support, which is the user we've just specified. Okay, so you can see there that the status is now pending approval. And if we close this, we can go to the approval request entries, and we can see our orders that are pending approval. So it was this one here, 106048. And we can see that it's been approved by us, and now it's open with an approver ID of support. So now we need to go to that other user and approve it. So we're going to just change users now. We're going to run nav as a different user. We're going to run it as the other user so we can see the process through. But normally this is when the other user would do it from their computer. But just to show you the process, I'm going to run as a different user. And then this user will now have a approval request for that purchase order. If we go to approval entries, we can see that request there. So this one here for 106045, that's been approved. So that's one from earlier. And this is the one we've just sent. So that's 106048, and we can see that it's open. If we go to the record, so this is when the user would say, okay, do we want to approve this request? And what is it? So it's for a car for £100. It's a very cheap car. So yeah, that's fine. We'll approve that. So the status at the moment is set to pending approval, which you can see here. And if we press approve, then it's released. So if we go back to our original user that sent the request, if we go back to the approval request entries, that request will now say it's been approved. So I'll show you now. So previously, 106048 said that it was pending approval, whereas now the status has changed to approved. So if we go back to the purchase orders and we look for 106048, we can see that it's released. It's not pending approval. And now if we try and post that, it will post. And then that's the posted document. So that's all gone through. So that is the simplest way to set up approvals. And we could add more people in the approval user setup if we wanted. So that is without using approval groups. So approval groups can be used in 3 different ways. You can say that everyone in the group needs to approve it in a specific order. You can say that everyone in the group needs to approve it, but in no specific order. And you can say that only one person from the group needs to approve it. So regardless of which 3 of those ways you want to use approval groups, you need to set up approval groups and put the users in there. So if we go to workflow user groups and create a new user group called PO, for purchase order. It doesn't matter what this is called. You can put anything there. So the names we'll see here, or the users we'll see here, are the users that are specified in the approval user setup. So we're going to say the approver is this user, and we want another user to put in the group. So what we'll have to do is we'll have to add that from the approval user setup. So we need to specify another user here. So we'll pick administrator, for example. And we're also going to give this user unlimited purchase approval. Press OK and go back to the workflow user groups. Edit that group. That user will now appear here. So we've got a group of 2 users, and by default, the sequence number will be assigned. So the first user in the sequence is support, and then the next user in the sequence is administrator. So this will be our sequence order for the approval. It will go to support, and then it will go to administrator. So we can go back to our workflow now. And bear in mind that this is the workflow that we copied from the template. So this is just the template purchase order approval workflow. And we're just going to make one tiny change. We are going to click on the first then response where it says add record restriction. And we're going to click the 3rd line where it says create an approval request for the record using approver type approver. And we're going to change the approver type from approver to workflow user group. Before you can edit workflows, you do have to disable them. And to do that, you untick the enabled. Now that's unticked, we can go back to our then response and change the approver type to workflow user group. We then specify the user group, which is purchase order, and that's the group we've just set up with support and administrator in, and we press OK. So if we enable our workflow again now and press OK, we're going to do another purchase order. So this time, the purchase order is going to be sent to support for approval and then to administrator for approval. So this is where you could have, say, team leader, then manager, or manager, then managing director. And you can add more people to your approval sequence. And it's just how many users you would have there would just depend on the hierarchy of your business and how many people you wanted that approval request to go through. So create a new purchase order and add a vendor invoice number. Pick an item. Again, doesn't matter as long as it's over £1 because that was what we set the limit at. So we'll pick another one of these very cheap £100 cars and we'll try and post it. As you can see, we can't because it needs to be approved, and then we'll send the approval request. Approval request has been sent, and close that. And we can go back to our approval request entries. So this is it, 106049. So approvers are support and administrator. So they are the two users in our user group. So it was support first, then administrator. So it's going to go to this user and then to this user. So I'm going to come out of this and I'm going to sign on as the first user in the chain. I'm not going to sign in as the user after that, but I'll just show you how if we approve it from this user, it still doesn't approve. So if we go to approval, entries to approve it, and we view the record. So it's pending approval. And if we approve it, it is still pending approval. And that's because it needs the next user in the approval chain to approve that. So I'll just go back now to our original user. And look at our approval request entries. So you can see now that 106049, which is our purchase order, has been approved by support, but now it's still awaiting approval from the next user in the chain. So yeah, that is how you set up approval groups with a sequence order. If you want to set up approval groups without a sequence order, you just set the sequence order to 1. You give them equal hierarchy. And to do that, you go to approval user groups, edit the group, and you just set that to 1 as well. And that means that these are equal now. So that means both users still need to approve the purchase order, but it doesn't matter which order they do it. So now administrator could approve it and then support could approve it, or the other way around. And then the last way that approval groups can be used is you can set them up so that either of the users in that group can approve that request. To do that, you need to make the new workflow from the template and do all the steps that we've just done and set the group up like this. But we need to make a change now to the workflow. So if we go to workflows, and edit the workflow. Again, you have to untick the enabled to disable the workflow so that you can edit it. So if we want to say that it can be any user, we have to change this slightly, change these rules slightly. And to do that, we click on the second on condition here and get rid of this filter. And that will change this to always. And then the next thing is to delete this third line where it says an approval request is approved. We delete this line and press enabled. We'll now send another purchase order for approval. When this purchase order goes for approval, either the support user or the administrator user can approve it. So either of the users in our approval group. So I'll just show you that now. So if we go to purchase orders and create a new one. Add in our vendor invoice number, item, and we'll pick the car again. So if we add one quantity, again, if we try and post this, it says that we need approval. So we'll send the approval request. So this approval request is now going to both users in the user group. We can see the status is pending approval. And if we close this, run as a different user, I'm going to change to this user. So we'll view our approval requests from the approval entries. And this is our order 106050. Open that record. Okay, right, what have we got here? So we've got one car. Okay, that's fine. So I'll approve that. And that's released it. Because in this process that we've just followed, either of the users could approve it. So it only took one, which was this one. So now that's released. Just to finish off the process, we'll go back to Navision, logged in as our first user, original user, and we'll now be able to post that purchase order because it's been released, it's been through the process, it's had the approval. Go to So we'll be able to see from our approval request entries as well. 106050, yeah, that's been approved. And if we go to purchase orders, status released, edit that, and post. And there we go, that's our posted documents. So that's 4 ways you can set up approvals. You can set them up with just one approver, or you can use approval groups, which can be used for all users in sequence order, all users in no order, or just one user from that group. So thanks for listening, and I'll pass you back over to Adam.
Great stuff. Nice one, James. I hope you all found that useful and interesting. Hopefully we've given you some food for thought. If you do have any questions, please take note of my contact details on screen now. I'm more than happy to help you out with anything that you've seen this morning. Keep an eye out for the recording of this webinar on our website soon. There you can visit all of our past webinars too. We uploaded a bunch of them last week, so if you're interested in our top tips for NAV Finance, Power BI, and Dynamics 365 for sales, be sure to take a look at our videos page. Also, Don't forget that our next webinar is coming up in a few weeks. That's on the 3rd of July, where we'll be looking at some of the key reporting strategies for NAV. So finally, thanks again for your time, and we'll see you again in a few weeks. Cheers.